Humans like to classify things. You see this in philosophy and the idea of archetypes, in psychology and the idea of schema, in linguistics and how we encode meaning into words. You even just find this in biology and our obsession with naming all the different species out there. And how we classify humans is not immune. This history is pretty fucking racist, but let's talk about it. The history of human classification. A fraught topic. A couple things we're going to talk about in this lecture series. We'll go first start with human classification in traditional cultures. Then we'll talk about the origin of the word race. And then we'll go into some scientific attempts at classification. But let's start off with human classification in traditional cultures. As anyone with eyes can see, there's a lot of different humans out there and a lot of different people who look very different. And people have noticed this for a long time. You know that kind of recent trend of color blindness? Pretty recent. If we look back at most traditional cultures, we find most classifications fall under the lines of us versus them. We're going to look at a few traditional cultures. We are, however, very limited in looking at cultures that left written records behind. So, of course, there are many cultures where we simply do not have the data to analyze this. But let's start off with the Greeks. They left a lot of records here. You can see from this map, yes, most of their country was centered around Greece, but we also have a lot of area around the Aegean Sea. So it is a little bit larger than the modern country of Greece. And they left a lot of beautiful architecture for us to look at. But let's talk about their culture. Greeks were pretty prejudiced in themselves. You were either Greek or you were a barbarian. But what was interesting about what they were looking at is they actually cared more about politics than anything else. They really looked down on any society with a king, and they were really all about democracy. So if you had a sophisticated system of politics, that is what they respected. They also thought that people looked different because they lived in different environments. So they noticed some people had slightly darker skin, some people had slightly lighter skin, but they related this to the environment where people lived. And this means that all of these differences are superficial. So theoretically, those could be changed rather easily. Another ancient culture we can look at is ancient China, because we also have a lot of writings from them. You can see here some of their gorgeous art and sculpture. China is a really big country, and at different parts of it in history, it was pretty different from each other. The history of China is very interesting. But one of the things that we see that's rather consistent is they viewed balance as very important. And in this particular view of balance, everything is best at the center. As such, they viewed China as the Middle Kingdom. So, of course, only the Chinese could be truly civilized under this viewpoint. They're, of course, prejudiced against different cultures, but similar to the ancient Greeks, they assumed that physical differences were due to living in different environments. If you're confused about this idea of the Middle Kingdom and what that means, well, let's look at a map. So there's China, there's north above it, south below it, so that's the middle, right? Um, it is interesting, no matter what culture you look at, everyone will find a way to justify why they are the unique or most important culture. That is pretty universal to all humans. Another culture we can look at is the Judeo-Christian tradition. This is larger than a single country because, these religions are currently some of the largest in the world. Here, these religions tend to classify people as either faithful or a heathen. But this is actually the easiest lines to cross because all you need to do is to convert, and now you can be faithful. So these are some of the least permanent groups. Yes, today, modern Judaism is related to a particular ethnic group, but you can still easily convert to that religion. So what we notice when we're looking at any of these traditional cultures, there's a lot of prejudice. And they're looking at culture, they're looking at religion, they're looking at politics, but all of these are relatively easily changeable aspects. So our ancient cultures, they are aware of human variation, but they're placing a different level of importance on it. And all of the divisions they're looking at tend to be drawn by easily changeable things, such as your culture or your religion. So, can you explain? How did early cultures classify different people?